A woman whose husband allows his mother to poison into their marriage. Here's the full story with an update. I, 21 female, and my DH 25 male, have been working through him being more independent and not relying so much on his family and overbearing mother. We started this end of last year when we all agreed that for the time being, until DH stopped working for the family business and got a job with benefits, that he'd go on my insurance. He's been on mother-in-law's insurance all of his life, and since we've been married she's done nothing but pester me about what I need to do, and how she feels she should be at appointments with him. She's even had a conversation with me where she flat out said she didn't feel I was urgent enough in scheduling my husband and his appointments. My husband has no major medical issues, so her pestering and meddling was met with gray rocking and information diets from me every time. Over time, DH has been coming out of the fog, but it's such a slow process, and I'm at my wit's end with everyone. We recently found out I'm pregnant, and lately I've been more concerned with not being agitated. So of course in January, after my husband was put onto my insurance and I had to sign he wasn't under any other insurance, I was thinking that a lot of the aggravation would be gone. To my surprise, when booking our appointments together, as my husband asked, mother-in-law's insurance was still active. When I called her and asked her about it, she started with funny story and went into how she accidentally left him on her insurance and just forgot to tell us. Which is absurd, because how do you forget when she had to file for insurance in October of 2022, and they send out information of who's a dependent. I was infuriated and husband didn't get why. I explained that for one I could lose my job for signing he didn't have other coverage, and two, his mother had been such a pain in the back trying to monitor all of his care and micromanage me and what we do. Not to mention it was taking more money from my check to have him on my employee insurance. He basically told me to calm down and that it was a mistake. As someone who works for a major insurance company and claims, I know that's not how mistakes happen, but I removed him from my insurance and went on from that situation, and her telling me that I needed to calm down, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I sent a group text to her and my husband saying that for the sake of my unborn child, anything mother-in-law has to say should go through my husband and to not message, call me. Who texted me hours later sending me an article on how to handle conflict with love. Mother-in-law. I was furious at her blatant disregard for anything my husband or I asked her to do. Again, husband didn't get why it was that big of a deal and kind of brushed it off. He was more upset I was even getting upset about it, to which I just blocked her from everything. A month has gone by and there was peace for a good while. Mother-in-law was starting to call husband every night, and I could hear her asking all kinds of questions about my pregnancy and if we found out what we're having yet, which we don't until next month, and I let things go. That was until yesterday. And a few weeks ago my husband has been complaining of a toothache. I have a regular dentist and he asked if he could get me an appointment. I told him I'd need his dental insurance card, a picture, and eventually the hard copy, last four of mother's social, her job and name of insurance. He said he'd call mother-in-law. He texted me back saying she said you didn't need all that, and sent me the name only of the insurance, her first and last name, and her DOB. Anybody with 2 brain cells and a speck of knowledge on scheduling someone as a first-time patient knows that they at least need the member ID if nothing else, and will eventually ask for mother-in-law's info once they see he's her dependent. I told husband I can't do anything with that, I need the information I asked for. Husband calls me and says mother-in-law stated that she doesn't have an insurance card for her dental health, and that they don't need all that information at the dentist. I told husband mother-in-law is lying. Get the information I'm asking for. He calls me back and says that mother-in-law stated no one she works with has their dental insurance card, and that again I don't need all that info. So just to make a point, I call my dentist office, and what's one of the first things they asked for? The member ID, group number, and phone number on the back of the insurance card. So after that phone call I call husband and ask him if he wants mother-in-law to start making his appointments, because I know what I'm talking about. Have worked in insurance for pharmacies and in claims for my whole working career since 17, and know what I'm asking for. And that if he has to call me one more time saying what his mother said, he can have her schedule it. So again he says he'll call me back. Each time I'm not noticing I'm getting more and more annoyed at this stupid cat and mouse game. Each time I'm telling my husband that's a lie, she can go on her employee portal and get her info, or call her insurance company. So he calls me again, this time saying she said the dentist office is just giving you a hard time, and you need to tell her what dental office you're calling because she'll just call herself. At that point I went smooth off. I cussed up one wall and down the other and told him that I'm done. I didn't give him the name of the dentist, but I was done. So a few minutes later he texts me pictures mother-in-law text him of her dental insurance card from her work computer on her employee portal, with all the information on it. That pissed me off even more, and that was just yesterday. My husband and I talked and he said he understood, but the events of today proved me wrong, because this was just yesterday. Maybe I'll make another post about today. But this was so long, I just want to know if I need to cut them all off and enjoy my pregnancy alone because blocking mother-in-law isn't working, when my own husband allows her poison into our marriage. I honestly can't imagine how exhausting it must be to be in a relationship with a grown adult man who is incapable of making a doctor's appointment. You don't have a mother-in-law problem, but a DH problem. 25 and needs someone else to make his doctor's dentist appointment. I've done that since I was 14. And this stupid phone game. Why can't your husband just make appointments himself? If he would call and make his own appointments, none of this would have happened. You and DH definitely need to get into counseling before you have this baby. He does not get it at all. The back and forth would have driven me insane. Also, since you're pregnant, it is a good time to talk about your birth plan and mother-in-law. She's going to interfere with your baby if given the chance. You seem great at setting boundaries, but DH needs to be told what you expect from him now. Your husband has been so infantilized by his mother that he's still a child. I know counseling is expensive, but it is cheaper than a divorce and custody battles. Your husband is desperately in need of some very deep therapy. Until he learns how effed up this is, he will not be a very good husband or father. Every time you're not there with the baby, he'll have his mommy coming over to baby them both and destroy your marriage. I'm sure that would be a dream come true for her. Fight for your little family and put that lady in check now. Boundaries now. You are the mom. You are the wife, and as much as she may treat you as the incubator, don't give her 1 inch of leeway in your life. You got this. You have every right to be upset. As someone who's worked years with insurances, you are right. I think I would make husband call the office to make his own appointments. He needs to hear from them what they need. Also, a marriage counselor might be helpful to get him to understand his boundary-lacking mother. Update. After the conversations happened with mother-in-law, DH and I had a sit-down convo about it. He admitted to me that he's slow to recognizing certain things his mother does, but that it clicked in his mind when she said she needed to call. He admitted that he just wasn't taught how to do anything and that he wants help. He admitted he wants to be independent and a good husband. He asked me to teach him how to look up dentists and make appointments for things. Needless to say, it was sort of a breakthrough conversation because he wasn't at all defensive and apologized for stressing me and the baby. While this was nice and all, I knew this wasn't the end of the road, but I didn't know just how soon mother-in-law would be back at it with her tactics. In my previous post, I stated how I blocked her and how much peace it was for the time being. I didn't mention how I talked to my mother about it, who convinced me that she wouldn't call me after all that, and to unblock her just in case of emergencies. So about a week ago, I unblocked her phone number and completely forgot about it. The next day after she tried to control the insurance information while I'm at work, I get a phone call from who? Mother-in-law. Instantly my heart rate went up and my hands started shaking because I knew it wouldn't be a good day if she was calling my phone after all this. I answered and started recording our conversation from my other phone. "Hello," I say, and she responds, "Hey, I know you don't want me contacting you, but I need to know where DH is," saying this is her usual domineering demeanor. Instead of relenting, I got spicy back. "Why do you need to know?" She was quiet for a second and then came back with a more pleasant tone. "I was just calling because his little brother, who DH has only met once and is the product of another woman living in another state, was found dead." Usually this would be one of those things I brush off and don't turn into a Reddit post. But the reason this was so upsetting was because my husband was in an interview. People do interviews all the time. But this was a big deal because my husband has worked for his grandfather and his landscaping business for about 3 years, and started when he fell on hard times. His grandfather has been paying him under the table, with no documentation, no direct deposit, with usually cash and no employee insurance the whole time. About 8 months ago, I made a big fuss with DH because this was unsustainable. We were considering moving into a bigger house, but could only do so with my income. While I make enough to move into something really nice on my income alone, it's not fair to our relationship or my husband that he can't contribute to the household. At the time, he begged his grandfather to put him on direct deposit, to which his grandfather made many promises, but never did it. After a month or 2 of waiting and our lease ending, we moved on my income alone, and I made it an even bigger deal. I promised I'd never do that again. DH was upset at the time but started working towards better. Recently, his grandfather has been paying him $100 to $300 less from his weekly payments. DH hasn't been able to afford certain things and it's been a financial strain on me. So of course him having this interview to be making good money an hour with a reputable company with benefits was a big deal. While I sympathize with the death in the family and knew others would take it harder, I knew my husband didn't need that distraction while in an important interview. Unfortunately, his brother had passed and I wanted him to find out after his interview, so he wouldn't be getting phone calls and thrown off. So back to the phone call. I tell mother-in-law, DH is in an important interview, and I would rather him put his focus on that right now and find out later. Don't call him right now, just give it some time and I'll text him to turn his phone off, or ignore phone calls right now so he doesn't get distracted. She agrees and says, oh, I totally forgot about his interview. I thought DH, brother-in-law, and grandfather were all together. If she thought that, why would you call my phone after being told not to? Why not just call DH? I'll just call my daddy, the grandfather, and tell DH to give me a call when he gets the chance. Okay, cool. An agreement, I thought. Wrong. I text DH and told him to not answer any phone calls and to completely turn his phone off. About 10 minutes later, he calls me. And the first thing out of his mouth is, my mother called me and told me about my brother. I could punch the walls, I was so upset. Not only did she manage to successfully raise my blood pressure by giving DH the runaround the day before, she completely ignored what I asked again and could have screwed up his entire interview. I asked how his interview went and how he was feeling and he told me exactly what I thought he would. Interview went fine, she just so happened to call me right as it was ending. And I didn't know him that well, but I'm sorry he's dead. Needless to say, she's blocked indefinitely, and I had a talk with my husband about the phone call. I told him how I recorded it, so nobody thinks I'm lying, and how she went right behind my back and did what I asked her not to. Of course, he didn't see the big deal at the time. It wasn't until he got home he said he understood. I just am over it all. I know there's an SO problem here as well, but I'm asking what I can do to manage what's to come this weekend and for the funeral next weekend. I know mother-in-law is going to soak up every opportunity she can, and do not want to deal with any of them. I can only imagine my husband and I at the funeral, and her taking the liberty to run my husband around asking him to do errands for others, or see us and say something backhanded about my clothes, or introduce DH but conveniently forget I'm sitting there. DH wants to go to the funeral, and rightfully so, but I know the stress that's to come and I don't think my husband is strong enough to protect me. I know this is a time of death, but is it wrong for me to still not want anything to do with them? Not go to the funeral? If mother-in-law attempts to get DH to run errands, simply respond with, we will leave that to you, mother-in-law, and offer no reason as to why. You don't need to explain, much less justify a decision to her, as that only empowers her further. Introduce yourself to people and don't give her the chance to do it. Your mother-in-law probably shouldn't be going to this funeral, because I can't imagine she has the type of relationship to be welcome if your DH has only met his brother once. So your worry about dealing with her at the funeral shouldn't be an issue. He really should have had his phone turned off during the interview, and he really shouldn't have answered a phone call. Massively unprofessional and totally his responsibility. Like, that is so odd to me that he would just pick up the phone to her then. Go to the funeral with DH and don't leave his side. Beforehand, the two of you sit down and come up with responses to her rudeness. Have quick comebacks you've rehearsed that highlight her rudeness. Make her uncomfortable and embarrassed for her own behavior. Then you disengage with mother-in-law by walking away as soon as possible whenever she is rude. Do not continue to give her your attention if she starts her crap. Will DH be asked to be a pallbearer? If not, you can manage how much time you are in mother-in-law's orbit by hanging out with cousins, friends outside during the visitation. There's always a group of them hiding out for the same reasons, or by coming in just after the funeral starts, and just sit in the back row. If DH doesn't want to attend, you don't have to be present at the funeral to say your goodbyes. He can go to the cemetery the day after to pay his respect. Your stress levels with his abusive family members sounds through the roof, and with a baby on board, you know this can't go on. Just your involuntary physical reaction when your mother-in-law called. That's a sign of intense stress and distress. Please cut yourself a break and don't go, stay home. Yes, DH's mom will prey on him, and his abusive grandpa might snark a little, but that's a short-term result, and the price of attending the funeral. Focus on the long-term goals of helping DH get himself free from his abusive employment, and free from his controlling mom.